1, 2, 3. One, two, three. One, two, three.
We finally got there.
It's working?
Yep, we're live. Welcome. Thank you everyone for tuning in and bearing with us while we sorted that out. I can see people saying hello in the chat, so great to have you along. My name is James Westall. I'll be your host this evening for the first session of 2022. We hoped to be in person.
Correct. Excellent. Thanks, James. And good evening or good afternoon, everyone, depending where you're calling in from. So my name is Richard Lee, and I haven't got a sort of a welcome page myself. I've got something Azure Purview, you can probably see on the screen there. But my name is Richard Lee, and I'm what we call a data and AI specialist here at Microsoft. I'm based out of Western Australia, and really my role is for my customers is to help them with their data, AI, and IoT strategy and journey in showing them how to best utilize our stack. Okay, let me know when to go. The audio or the image? Okay. One, two, three. I'm back. All right. So very quickly, I'm not too sure how much of this was heard or not, but my name is Richard Lee. I haven't got a welcome slide of myself at all, but I'm what we call a data and AI specialist here at Microsoft Australia. My background, I've been in data and AI for the past 12 years, specifically in the Microsoft stack. And being here in Western Australia, in Perth, behind the barricade that we've built around the state, I've been across typically, mainly the heavy industrial industries. So being in Perth, mining has played a big factor in that, and also utilities as well. So my role here at Microsoft is with my enterprise customers is to help them adopt anything in the data, AI, and IoT stack, and help in aligning the technologies and the technology strategy with their business strategy. So that's anywhere from proof of concepts, demos, architectures, across the board. And I guess today in Azure Purview, it's a little sneaky tidbit of what I do in the data governance space that is included in our data, AI, and IoT stack. And it's an interesting one as well. In probably go back 2 years ago, really, like how many people got up and about for data governance? I would say probably not many people at all. But definitely there was a fundamental shift over the past 2 years, in line with the influx and the large amount of data that started being captured across organisations, not just in, say, heavy assets like mining and utilities, but across the board as well. And in line with that as well was customers were shifting from being just a single cloud or just having a small amount of databases and data sources to actually that very quickly expanding to cross-cloud, cross many database technologies, and they needed an easy way to actually bring that all together to actually understand where the data is, so they can understand what is the quality of the data. So ultimately, they can actually start getting value from their data, which really only starts happening when you start using the data. So very quickly, data governance, just to encapsulate what that exactly is, because it's not the most sexiest of subjects, but is very well needed, especially in large enterprises. Data governance is needed to improve data quality, so the data is trusted, and that is a huge one, especially when you start thinking about data sets, reports, AI, etc., going up all the way up to the executive level. They need to trust the data that comes onto their desk, and it takes weeks, months to actually gain their trust in the data, but can take literally one report, one night for that trust to be eroded. So it's a very important topic to be across. It's also important because companies, when they work inferior data, it negatively impacts their downstream insights, analysis, and recommendations. Data quality requires that the data is complete, unique, valid, timely, accurate, and consistent. So they're typically tenets that you think about when you think of data quality. And data quality problems can affect business operations. So poor data quality can cause process errors, process delays, unplanned operational costs, inaccurate decisions, and the like. And now we've got to start thinking about data has to be governed across a distributed computing environment. So as I go along, so to set the premise of why we're here as well, is when we're talking about the C-suite, 90% of them are ready, and this is probably going back a year and a half ago now, that 90% are already saying that information is critical. It's a critical enterprise asset, and that's quite obvious to a lot of us. But this is coming from Gartner, because it's actually on everyone's desk now to actually see this. And zettabytes as well. Fun fact: zettabytes. If you want to understand in a byte how many zeros are in that byte to make up 1 zettabyte, and it's 27 zeros, which is huge, right? So there's a lot of data that we're going to be generating and capturing yearly by 2025. Is huge. So we need to figure out a way how we can govern this estate, not from just an operating model perspective and people and process, but also from a technology perspective. And then we start thinking about data governance, and it's becoming increasingly interdisciplinary across both the discovery side of things and the compliance side of things, typically straddled in the middle by the chief data officer. So in the discovery side of things, think about your data scientists, your engineers, report developers. When they're creating the content, they need to know where it is. Do I trust this content? Is there actually data out there that I actually didn't know that we had that I could actually get to? Especially when you start thinking about people that come in and out of teams, scrums, etc. They need to be able to find this data very quickly with autonomy as well. And more these days, especially when we're talking about the potential risk exposure and cost to companies when they don't take compliance seriously, especially when you're talking about leaking of data, personal data. You need a tool that can actually, across your estate, understand or report up what is the exposure to risk. Is your usage or the usage of the data across your estate compliant? Is the data in the right areas? Is it in the right region? You might have region-specific compliance measures in place. How do you understand that across the organization, you've got hundreds of engineers, report developers, etc., using your data, that you remain compliant and you're confident in it? And when you think of data governance, and here at Microsoft, we think of these 4 tenets that we need to align with to make sure that we give a successful governance product. And that's, we need to be able to manage a growing data landscape, and that really talks to the fact that we're going to have a growing data estates in the coming years, especially when we're talking about IoT data coming in as an example. We need to be able to overcome operational silos. That can be across clouds, across database technologies, across data centers. How can we easily overcome those operational silos so we can actually start extracting value from our data? We need to increase the agility of those that use the data scientists, engineers, and the like. We need to ensure that they can get to the data quickly, they have trust in the data, and then they can start creating outputs from it. And lastly, and not always to leave it to last, but we need to ensure that we comply to industry regulations. So this is where it takes us to Azure Purview. And for a bit of quick background, like James mentioned, it has only recently gone generally available mid-late last year, which is very exciting for us. Azure Purview was actually in public preview for about a year. So even though it's only just gone GA, it's actually been around for quite a while. And I had a number of my customers in the enterprise space, especially in the insurance side of things and also utilities, leveraging or starting to leverage Azure Purview while as public preview, which does come with some risks, but just really showed the appetite across the customer base here, that they really were screaming out for a data governance platform that really scaled with their Microsoft modern data platform solutions. To take it a few steps back even more, Microsoft actually had a first foray into data governance, and I'm not sure if anyone remembers, and this might be pulling on a few memories here, that we actually had a first go at this using Azure Data Catalog, and we called it Azure Data Catalog, and this is probably going back 8 years ago. And there was a few issues with that, and it didn't actually get picked up quite widely, especially for all those users that weren't just Microsoft but went multi-cloud. And there's a number of reasons to that, which I'll talk to in a second, in terms of the improvements in the capabilities that you'll see in Azure Purview compared to definitely what Azure Data Catalog was, but also other tools that are out there as well at the moment. So first of all, Purview enables unified data governance. So, and I'll jump into these 4 tenets in the next 4 slides as well. But what we've actually been able to do with Azure Purview, because we're quite late to the game, especially when you compare to the Informaticas of the world, the Calibras of the world, they've been around for a long time, which has been a benefit to them. Obviously, they've got a very comprehensive capability and feature set when you compare it to Purview where it is right now. But what we've been able to do is rethink around how are we going to create this data governance platform, because we're late to the game here. And that's what you'll see, and I'll talk to you a little bit more around the fact that it is now a fully PaaS service sitting in Azure, along with other benefits, really built for the cloud. Really, we want to ensure that we can set the foundation for effective data governance. And that really talks to, amongst a number of things, but what we call the data map, where through an automated fashion, we're actually able to connect, integrate with many different data sources out there, not just in Azure, and lay the foundations for you then to start thinking about compliance over the top of it, access policies over the top, sensitivity labeling over the top. Once you get the foundations right, you can start thinking about all these extra capabilities over the top. Really, we want to also maximize business value for the data consumers. We want to give them confidence in the data that they reach out to, get to, and also really streamline that process for them to get to that data as well. We know, especially for those developers and the like, even power users, the more tools that you have to click through and use, the harder it is actually to adopt or understand that end-to-end process and actually start getting value out of it. Through Purview, where the vision and what we already started doing is to really try and minimize the number of tools to actually get to the outcome, which is typically get to that data to start using it. And also, we've got our CDO view over the top. We need to, once we have got all this insight into the data through the crawling of your data assets extracting that metadata and putting intelligence over the top of it. We want to be able to build reporting over the top to understand what a data estate posture looks like from both the security and compliance perspective. So as I go along and double click on the reimagine the data governance, we're able to manage and govern operational, transactional, and analytical data. We can connect to a very wide range of data sources that I've mentioned, not just Azure as well. It's cloud native and purpose built as well, which is great. So now that it's PaaS, we can now start putting benefits into it, such for example, the elasticity of the model as well, where you only pay for what you use. A huge one here is also around when you compare licensing to other platforms out there as well, where ours is just a consumption model. We're not paying for how many people actually start using it, which is usually a huge cost benefit to customers out there. Like I manage, it's fully managed and serverless. And really, if you're getting down back to basics, it's a tool that will eliminate the manual ad hoc and homegrown solutions that you could be using today in something as simple as Excel, which some customers out there do use because it's free. One of the huge features out of Azure Purview is the fact that it also can now automate the discovery of the data that's either on-premise, multi-cloud, or even your SaaS solutions. So this is a huge contrast to a lot of the more foundational data governance platforms that have been out for a while. Is we can automate the ingestion and the mapping of that data for you. No longer do you need to have stewards out there that will go out, find new sources, bring it into the data governance platform manually, etc. We look to automate as much of that first mile as possible. And that comes with the automated discovery of data. And for a bit of background there, if you're across Azure Data Factory as an example and integrated runtime, it just uses the same technology there to connect to different data sources that may be sitting behind firewalls. We also now can, once we've got the data that comes in there, we can actually now start classifying the data at scale. And this is through, and I can talk to this a bit longer, around simple regex expressions or lookups as well. So as that data comes in, we can start putting extra intelligence or analysis over the top of it to say, yes, this is PII data. Yes, this is an email address. Then based on that, we can actually then do other business process flows over the top of that once it actually has been classified properly, like sensitivity labeling. Also, a massive feature of Purview is around the data lineage piece. So in an automated fashion where we can, we'll actually check Data Factory ETL jobs. We'll check Synapse. We'll check tools like Azure SQL to actually understand where the data is flowing end to end, all the way into, typically from the source all the way back into Power BI as well, which is huge. We'll look to automate as much of that where our services support it. But again, which I'll talk to a bit later, it's a fully open platform on the Apache Atlas API. So you can actually, through its API, augment it and add to it as well, where it's not automatically done for you. Now, also as part of this, it's not just the technical side, and typically that's where we're coming from, right? But it's also a way to actually connect both the business with the technical side of people. And that starts with the business glossary, right? We can put in business descriptions and KPIs into Purview as that one area where anyone across organization can go and find out where approved KPIs actually, what they actually mean. Not only what we can do is we can actually attach these glossary items to particular assets as well within Purview. So if we think about tables or databases, etc. What we can also do is typically in data governance is you want to structure your data assets into something by typically what we might call a data domains, or might be geography as well. We give you ability from a business perspective on how to group these data sources together based on the way that you manage data across your organization. And lastly, once you've got this data, we also then give you the ability to, at a glance, see how your data is across your estate, whether it be around how many types of data, what type of data is coming through, whether it be Parquet, it could be CSV, Avro, whatever it may be, understanding what is coming through, where it is going, what has been labeled, what has been classified. It gives you through a pane of glass to understand what you currently look like as an organization. What we also give you the ability to is actually extrapolate over the top of that, pull the data out and build your own reports as well at the moment. So as I move along here, from a very high level view of what Azure Purview is, typically we have in the middle, as it stands right now, we've got the data map that sits at the heart that will connect to all various different data sources and extract the metadata and pull it in. And then also part of that data mapping process, we've got the ability to set sensitivity labels. So is it highly sensitive or not? Set up classifications, is it email addresses, is it PII data, is it first name, last name, etc. On top of that, we're able to actually then do our data catalog that I mentioned around business glossary, etc. And over the top of it, used by both data producers and consumers as well and the like. So I've got a few slides here just to give you a bit of a sneak peek on what it actually looks like. And then what I'll actually do is I'll jump into a bit of a demo, which usually is a little bit more exciting than me just talking to the slides here. But it all starts with a Purview data map, as you can see on the screen here. And I'll show this in the demo as well. Essentially, what we call the data map is just a graph describing the number of data assets we've actually pulled into Purview and the relationship between them. We can group these data sources into what we call collections that can then align to your organizational structure and how you actually manage data. Typically, we call them data domains. In some organizations, especially the more enterprise globals, they'll build data domains that have actually got executive sponsorship all the way to the top. Meaning if there's any particular issues with data quality that's actually causing downstream issues to decision making, there's actually a sponsor that looks after that data domain. They're able to make the necessary changes and movements to ensure those sort of problems don't happen again. And what is growing very, very quickly, and we say 200 plus here, but it's probably more 250 plus right now. But the built-in data classifiers, a lot of the classifiers you don't have to build yourself, you can create custom ones, but we've got a lot of those included at the moment with Purview. And also the data sources, again, definitely more than I'd say than the 35, more than the 50, 60, is the growing number of data sources that we can actually bring to Purview. The rule of thumb is, of course, typically we've got all Azure services that you can bring into Purview as that first gate that we have, but very quickly that is growing into the likes of AWS. So think of Amazon RDS or S3 if you worked with those services before, even Google as well. So I think Google BigQuery, I think also Google Looker from a visualization perspective. You can really see the reach is really going out broader than Azure. So you can start bringing and managing that data within Azure Purview. Another one out there is also Snowflake as an example. I know organizations are using Snowflake in Azure, and that's also integrated into Purview. This is just showing you what the data catalog looks like, and I won't bore you too much because I'll be getting to this in a second in the demo. Again, this is what the bird's eye view looks like from a CDO perspective for some of the reporting and insights that we can get from Azure Purview itself, but I'll jump to that again in the demo. And I think lastly of the slides I was going to touch on for now, and if I've got time, I might look back to a few of the others later on, is just really the holistic perspective that Purview actually has now, and very much squarely works across both the Microsoft Azure clouds, the Power Platform, O365, SQL Server, and absolutely from a hybrid standpoint as well, whether it be on-premise within Azure, SaaS offerings like, for example, Dynamics, Salesforce, or whether it be on other clouds as well. So with that said, I'm going to stop presenting and jump over to a demo. As I do this, James, I might just quickly take a pause as well if there's any questions that have been asked. If not, I can just jump straight into the demo.
There is a question. It's from Ali. The question is there a plan for Purview to define container, as in ADLS, or table, as in SQL, level, fine-grained permissions to be added into a collection? It's quite a technical one.
Yeah, great question. So what we're seeing is the vision to hopefully answer that is, yes, part of what Purview will be doing is allowing you as a user to go into Azure Purview and define your security policies, define your role-based access control across your services. And think about, I guess, if you take it back from a step back in terms of what you'd have to do if you weren't doing that. If you've got a modern data platform, typically you're going to be going to many different services and hoping that those security policies are aligned across them, especially if you're talking about, it might be in Synapse, it could be in ADLS Gen 2, etc. So yes, absolutely, that is on the roadmap. It's currently in public preview to do that against ADLS storage accounts and also Azure SQL, I think, from memory as well. Only in select regions at the moment. I think France being one of them. But absolutely, that is exactly what we're going to be doing now and into the future. And also, what we'll be doing, just to take that maybe that question a step further as well, is what we will be looking to do and where I foresee Purview going is the ability to set policies based on classification that's actually come through as well. So it's actually a little more automated than just actually I've said these group of people can have access to X. We can actually have it a little bit more dynamic. So based on the classification policies that you've set, you can then ensure that the data stores are actually secure based on policies you may set over those classification schemes. Hopefully that does answer it. All right, so should I jump ahead, James?
Yeah, we don't have any follow-up on that, and I'm sure we'll get it, so we can cover that at the end if we do.
Excellent, no, not a problem at all. So for those that haven't seen Azure Purview in the flesh before, this is what it looks like. And for those that are Azure developers here on the call, again, to instantiate a Purview instance is as easy as going to the Azure portal and setting it up as a service within a resource group and within a subscription. There's a few limits on how many you can actually set per subscription, but realistically, typically in an organization, you will have 1 to 2 Purview instances set up in a production or in the, if you're going to have a second one, a non-production environment. So once you have got that set up and got the necessary security policies in place, you have to just travel to the URL like the above to actually then start using Purview. So if we can see on the screen when you first enter, you can see just going from the top in the middle there over to the right is instantly it's telling us that we've got 57 sources that we're actually got mapped into Azure Purview. And of those 57 sources, we actually got 1.5 million assets that have actually been scanned. And across all that, we've actually then got 224 glossary items that have actually been put into Azure Purview that may actually then have relationships to those assets as well to give it even more context to what people are looking at when they view particular assets across Azure Purview. What you see is a search box here, which I'll jump to in a second. And then very nicely down the bottom there, which makes sense, is very quickly you can easily go to recently accessed to have a look to see if you're looking at a particular asset all the time, it's there, it's easy for you to actually access. So with that said, what I'll do is I'll pretend that I'm someone in marketing, perhaps, and I want to go and find some customer information. What I can do is I can type in customer here. The IntelliSense will come up and give me a few search suggestions, some asset suggestions, for example. But in this case here, what I'll do is I'll just hit enter and it will take me to the search screen. So as this loads up, what we can see here from the top is at the moment, you've got source types, everything is actually chosen at the moment. We can see instances as well. And also we've got object types, so dashboards, can be data pipelines, files, folders, collections as an example. So collections here, like as a domain example, I suppose it could be actually data domains as your collection here. So you actually can restrict the search to that particular data domain that you may be interested in. Also got the ability to search based on classification, which I'll use in a second. Also contacts, so you may have stewards or owners for particular assets that have attached to particular assets. You can also search by them. Labels, which I'll get to a bit in a bit later, is very important, especially when we're talking about compliance, and the ability to actually set sensitivity labels to assets greatly secures your environment than without. And also then we can do it by glossary terms as well. So look, with that said, I've gone by customer, and look, I want to go look at some customer information. And what I can do here is, first of all, I actually want to make a report that's got some email addresses in it. So what I can do is I can go, all right, let's actually search by a customer that has an email address in it. So now this is actually then down filtered all the the tables or assets, it might not just be a table, it might be a Parquet file, it might be a CSV file that actually has email address in it. So the email address could be in the name of the table, it could be in any field as well within that table. It will come back and show me all the assets that particularly align to that search result there. So you can see here instantly that from when I go into the overview here, it gives me a few different pieces of information. Typically, if someone's actually gone in and set an asset description, it will come up here. If there's been any manual classifications for this asset, it would also come up under classifications. And then what we can see here under schema classifications, and this is where our search result actually lined up to, is the fact that through the automated scanning and classification scheming as the data when it came in, one of the classifications for this table was actually email address, which is why it came through. And I'll get to that in a second in the schema. On the right here, we can very quickly see where the asset came through, part of the collection path. So actually you can see here it's part of the root node and also the hierarchy. So you can see it's part of this schema, part of this database, part of this Azure SQL Server as well. I'll come back through a whole bunch of different properties as well, just to give you a bit more context and information if you want to have a look at it. And this is where we can then jump into the schema side of things. So automatically, once we set up the data source into the map and it started the scan, it brought in all this metadata automatically. So no one at all had to manually go in here and create it, which is very different to other technologies out there, and especially Azure Data Catalog v1. And not only that, when the actual metadata and data types were actually populated, but the classifications came through and also the sensitivity labels came through. So this is why we came up with email address. Now, just to talk very quickly to the sensitivity label portion of this, what you can also do is part of Microsoft Compliance Center, and if you've got automated scanning and compliance tagging set up, you can actually have labels set automatically within Purview with sensitivity attached to them. And these particular labels could have particular privileges assigned to them. So for example, a highly sensitive label that might be attached to a table, you may not be able to actually extract the data into a CSV or even email it to anyone. It'll actually prohibit you from doing that. Say if you're trying to do that through from Power BI. Those rules are actually inherited from Compliance Center and actually then assigned here in Azure Purview, which is particularly important, especially when we're talking about compliance across your modern data platform estate. Contacts here, you can set up experts and owners of it. And also, if it can, I'll just talk to what the related services are as well. So in this case here, it's talking to the actual schema. It has all these different tables in there that we could potentially look at as well. Now, if I jump back, I might look at a quick lineage example as well. So let's look, say, for example, I actually know of a table I want to look at. So again, I can look and search for the exact table as well. If I like, I can jump into it. And this example here, I'll jump straight to lineage. And what's awesome here is now you can see upstream and downstream how this particular table is actually used, which is exciting. So think about from a DBA perspective, and you're making a change on a particular database or particular table, you actually know what the downstream impact of that actually is. But for someone like, say, a data scientist or a report developer, and they're trying to, say, diagnose a potential issue in a report, they'd want to know and go back and find out, actually, how was this data set actually created? What different tables or data sources were actually combined and transformed together to actually create this one data set? I need to go back and find out where this particular root cause is. Another example of this is if we want to go into product, and I hope I'll find the right one here. And I'll jump into Azure SQL here. The lineage can also get a little bit more complicated as well. So this one here, if I've chosen the right one, will show you a bit more of the DAG and how the downstream assets actually pulling data from this one particular product table as well. So you can see here, you can actually click into them as well. So this is saying it's a particular process that ran this. This was a copy data activity from Azure Data Factory. As an example, you can actually go through, and if you need to, switch to the particular asset as well. You can even drill into and open Azure Data Factory as well. And same with any of the other assets as well. You can actually drill through to them and find out a bit more information about them if needed. And what you can also do, if you like, is understand the lineage of the columns as well. And as you'd know, sometimes if you're doing data transformations, you're doing a group by statement, you're getting rid of some of the columns because you're doing an aggregate, a sum and average, or whatever it may be. Over time, say, for example, 20 different columns that are in the source table, we might end up only with, say, 6 or 7 in downstream tables. This is one way to showcase as the transformations happen throughout your pipelines, what effect does that actually have on the columns that are coming through as well. So with that, I'll jump out, and I've gone through end-to-end of the search capability there from a higher level. And of course, there's other opportunities there to go and look at other technologies and database systems as well, like Teradata is there, Google Looker is there, Tableau I think will be coming soon, Snowflake, etc. as well. With that said, I'll jump over to what we call the data map. And the thing about this is the heart of Azure Purview, where we actually start mapping all the different sources that you want to start bringing into Purview to actually then enable the rest of your organization to actually leverage that metadata and the information that comes from it. So what you're seeing here is a very high level snapshot of the different sources that it's actually connected to, and you can see it here on the map, but also the different collections these sources actually align to and fall under as well. Now, collections have a number of different uses. From a business perspective, and I've alluded to this already, is you can align this to how the business see data from a data domain perspective. So to business users, it makes sense. From business users, they'll know where to look for data, especially when we're talking about, say, data stewards and data owners as well. That can really create a clear delineation of who's looking after what across the organization. What we can also do from a technical perspective is we can, at a collection level, set up a few different configuration options that will then pass down and push down to the rest of the data sources that we have on the screen there. So for example, we may want to group a number of different data sources that only refresh from the source every night. Some other collection of sources we may want to refresh every month. And a lot of that may depend, because potentially we want to refresh it every night because it's a development database and a lot of things are changing all the time. So we want to stay abreast and an understanding of how people are using the data and what it currently looks like. And that might be especially from a compliance perspective. But maybe for an example, for some more production-based sources where the schema actually doesn't drift all that often, you may be happy to actually only do it every month, because when you break it down to cost, compute comes at a cost. So if you're doing and searching for data every night, that's going to come with a cost to the owners or the custodians of Purview. But you may be able to get away with it every month. So from a cost perspective, you may be happy to do that. So a few different reasons there why you want to think about collections. And also lastly, was around security as well. As you start to onboard users onto Purview, you might have salespeople, marketing, finance, engineering, human resources, etc. From a security perspective, you may not want all of them to actually be able to see all the assets across the organization. You may, for whatever reason, people from marketing, you only want them to be able to see marketing data sources. So from a security perspective, you're able to also set this at the collection level, which is great. If you want to register data sources, and I won't go and take this right to the end, but really just to register data sources and just to showcase very quickly the different sources that we have available, is just clicking register. And you can go through, you can see the number of different sources that are available in GA or in preview and will be coming soon. So you can see here, not just Microsoft sources, but also to sources or destinations from other clouds as well. We can jump to collections here, and this is where you'd actually start framing up and building out your collections and what that looks like from an potentially information management perspective within the business. This is where you set up your role assignments. You can then also get a bit of a better understanding around, for each of the collections, how many assets are actually under there, how many sources are actually under there. Definitely as a best practice rule of thumb, try not to make really deep collections, and I'll probably suggest what you're seeing on the screen here probably isn't best practice, and that's more so because it's this is a demo environment and people have been trying lots of different things on here. But really try and, where possible, make it as flat as possible to at least 1, 2, or 3 different levels there. You don't want it completely flat because then you haven't got the ability to leverage lots of the management capabilities, but you just don't want to have it too deep because then it becomes too much of a burden to maintain it going forward. So you really need to strike that balance between the two. What we also have here is what we call scan rule sets. And here is where you can actually go into and create scan rule sets that allow you to set up what rules are run over particular sources or collections when they are scanned. So for example, you may have a number of different classification schemes, whether it be classifying government type information, email addresses, financial, personal, security, as you can see on the right here. You may not want to run this for every single source because, again, that will take compute power, which will come at a cost. So you can really look to optimize and understand and see what rule sets can be run or you want to have run against each of the different sources that you set up within the data map. Fully customizable, by the way, as well. So of course you can go in here, set custom ones, go new set. As an example, go in, and I won't go and take this fully to the end, but you can say, yep, these are the file types I actually want to scan as part of this rule set. And then these are the rules I actually want to run over it. And also you can set up patterns as well to say, actually, these are the ones I actually want to skip for whatever reason. So as an example here, this has actually got committed in there. So if you've been working with Parquet before or big data, typically you'll see a lot of success or committed type files in there, and they're ones that you want to typically just skip over. Jumping ahead to pattern rules, this gives you, and this is probably more of an advanced topic, but it gives you the ability to create resource sets over the way that your data lands in your data lake. So for those that have been in the data lake or big data space, worked in it for at least a little bit, you'll know how typically data files actually land in a data lake, and typically you might have like a database, a table as folders, and then goes into the ISO date pattern as an example. Then within each day, or actually could be even minute, you've got individual Parquet files holding data. What you can actually do to set up is if you've got custom patterns in the way that you actually land data into your data lake, you can set up those pattern rules in here to ensure that when Purview actually scans over your data in your data lake, it properly groups them together. So it's not creating this information sprawl of assets within your Purview data map, when realistically they're actually just part of the same table. It's just Purview didn't recognize the actual pattern rule that you had set. So that's one of the advanced features that you can do within Purview. Again, integration runtimes, I think I alluded to this to a little bit earlier, but integration runtimes are typically what you'll set up, or what you'll set up if you are trying to get to data that's behind a firewall. Bit like Azure Data Factory as well, same approach, highly secure, and this is where you would set it up in here. Now, lastly, in this mapping pane of Azure Purview, we've got the classifications that I've spoken to as well. Now, out of the box, there's 200 plus classification schemes that come with Azure Purview. And you can see here, there's a lot that span from Australia-based information, so bank account number, business number, company number, driver's licenses, etc., but worldwide as well. So you can see Brazil, Bulgaria, Canada in there as well. So really it's trying to encapsulate worldwide what are the potential classification schemes that you would be interested in. Now, This doesn't stop you though from actually creating your own classifications as well. So typically you'll go in and create your own classification, and here it might be for a particular, let's just say SAP ID that you have within your organization that comes in a particular format. And you want Purview to actually pick that up because that might be something that is actually classified. You actually don't want that to be come out and pulled into other downstream reports. So you might want to go in and create a classification. As you create the classification name, you'd go in here and actually then attach a classification rule to it. Now, as an example, I'll just pull in one of these that we have here, is our classification rules are typically either a lookup or regex expression. And it's nothing too onerous other than that. And we find this to be flexible enough to essentially capture all cases. So in here, we've got a regex data pattern example here. We've got the minimum match threshold of 60%. So basically what we're saying here is when it scans your data, we need at least 60% to match that data pattern. And also we can do a column pattern as well. So if the column is of SIN, we'll just automatically classify that column. We already know that that's a Canada SIN number as an example there. So jumping out, that's out of the data map pane there. I'll jump into data policy. So this is, I think, links back to the question that we had earlier, and this is something that is very new to us, and I don't think I'll be able to show too much in this area just yet because of the preview nature of it, and also the fact that I may not have access, is the ability now to, and I'll first start with Azure services, is to actually set from the central Purview instance role-based access control measures on top of it for particular people or groups of people. So think about Purview now, it's turning from just this governance platform that you just use to map your data, classify data, see where it is, find where it is, but it's now turning into a security and privacy and compliance data governance tool as well, where now you can start thinking around, all right, I want to centrally manage my security posture and the data posture from Purview, and I can say these groups of people can always allow modified data within this resource group or within this Azure SQL instance or within Data Lake Gen 2 instance as well. So it's this is a very beginning of this journey into data policies, but I think this will be very foundational to future stuff that you could potentially then do with Purview. I think one of them alluded to before is, I'm sure what we'll see in the future is you could almost set dynamic policies based on the way data is classified. What happens if someone accidentally transferred data into a particular data lake that actually had sensitive data? What you want to make sure is that that is highly secure to only people from finance, for example. What this is really, I feel like, building the base is if we can now start classifying all the data and understanding if it's of particular sensitivity or high sensitivity, like financial data, and we can actually set the policies here in Purview as well, I see them coming together in the future where you'll actually be able to manage that dynamically based on the way data is actually classified as well, which is really, really exciting, and it really starts talking to the scalability of Azure Purview, which is great. And I think very quickly and lastly, as I look to finish up, really just talk to the last pane here around management. Nothing really to talk to here around account information. Metrics is now an Azure Metrics Advisor. This is where you can set your lineage connections. So Data Factory, I think for those that know Azure Data Factory, that's our data orchestration tool, but also within it, you've got the ability to use data flows, which is more your typical extract, transform, load tool. What Purview can do is integrate and unpack all those Azure Data Factories, themselves, and also the pipelines to understand lineage across the board. So this is where you can set it up. Also, data sharing as well. So you may or may not be aware of Azure Data Share as a service within Azure, and that gives us the ability to not only share from a business to business perspective, so across Azure AD boundaries, but also gives us the ability to actually share internally to different business units in a more coordinated and managed fashion. What we can actually do is hook in Azure Data Share to this as well. So that forms part of the lineage. And of course, this is where you can set up your credentials across the board here. And this essentially where you set it up for your key vault passwords, etc., and how to get that connected. So look, with that said, I think I'll take a quick pause there because I have covered a lot of ground and have tried to capture everything within Azure Purview and where it stands right now. The one thing I haven't been able to get to because it's not available in this instance of it because of my security, I haven't got enough security at the moment, is actually getting to show around the reports that come off the back of this. Like I mentioned, I think in the initial slides is we're capturing all this data. We actually want to start being able to report over it and understand, have there been any failed scans of data coming in? Because that actually could be a red alert. So we need to make sure that our security posture is up to date. We want to understand what sort of data is coming in. We want to understand where the data resides in terms from a region or subscription perspective as well. So we need to understand maybe some compliance around data sovereignty. In the reporting pane, we can actually go and understand a lot of that as well, especially around compliance and sensitivity labels. So unfortunately, I couldn't get to that today, but definitely if you look to go into Purview and give it a go, definitely I would suggest having a look at that piece of the puzzle as well.
Cool. Thank you so much, Richard. That was enlightening. We do have a couple questions. One from Marilyn. Marilyn would like to know, they've connected ADF with Purview, but cannot see lineage. Is lineage only enabled if data flow is present in the ADF?
Great questions. So there are a few considerations when it comes to automatically picking up the lineage. So data flows, yes, you can with data flows. You also can with copy activities. But there are a few gaps where our engineering team are trying to catch up on, so it does automatically catch up the lineage. So on hand, I haven't got those gaps on what they are. We actually have them actively in the documentation for Purview, and they're there. I just haven't got the link handy with me right now. But yeah, definitely I would suggest have a look at that documentation. It's all there. But I think you were on the right path there. And the question around data flows, yes, data flows is a big part of that to get the automated lineage. The rest you may need to, depending on how you set them up, to leverage the Apache Atlas API and looking to pull in the lineage that way into Purview. So as an example, just to take that a step further, we've got lots of customers that are using Databricks as part of their orchestration pipelines. And what they've done is they've actually integrated the API calls to the Apache Atlas API within their Databricks notebooks to actually push lineage into it as an example. So that's what we're seeing our customers do at the moment when it comes to lineage.
Another question was, how is access managed across Azure Purview collections? So how would you control access between one or two different collections?
Yeah, so you do that at the collection level, essentially. And I don't think I'll be able to jump in and go to the very end of how we'd set it up, unless they've changed it. So there's two things. So technically, absolutely, you can do it through role assignments, etc., and set it up here. I don't think I can set it up, so I better jump out there. So wouldn't be able to. This is how you would usually do it, sorry, through role assignments. I'm just trying to figure this through my head as I talk. I haven't got privileges to show you how to do it at the moment. When it comes from how would you do it perspective, from a business perspective, I guess that just depends on the organization, how you want to manage the Purview and how it's accessed. Because I've got organizations where they're like, all right, I'm going to open this up to absolutely everyone, and everyone within the organization can see that we've got the data there. They may not be able to get to it because they haven't got access to the underlying data store, but I'm happy with them to actually go and see that it's actually there. But then we've got other organizations that are definitely more so on the other side of the fence, where they're like, no, we only want to make sure the right people can actually see that the assets are there. For say, marketing people going to see marketing, or sales going to see sales, for example. So yeah, so that's what I'm seeing out in the market at the moment. But in role assignments, here is where you'd set it up.
One for myself, I suppose. Do you see with this product, obviously there's a lot of integration into like native data products, like things like SQL, Databricks, ADF, all those sorts of platforms. Do you think in the roadmap there'll be a little bit more integration into some of the M365 services, like in terms of looking at things like Teams information on that sort of information, or do you reckon that'll stay purely in the realm of MIP and AIP?
Good question. I haven't seen any chatter or talk around integrating, say, with Teams, for example, at the moment. I think from what I'm seeing and from my opinion, I've been seeing them focus on more so just data services that have got a data element to it, I guess, from a like a database perspective. But where I have been seeing them move to, which may be more in sort of the space you're just sort of alluding to there, is say with Dynamics, for example. So a SaaS solution that isn't actually a PaaS service or IaaS service that you have, but you can connect to that and extract the information out of that. So that's where I'm seeing them going, but not particularly or specifically something like Teams.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, because obviously Dynamics, you could put stuff into the CDS, right? And that would have the same
Dataverse.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so perfect. Well, I'm just scanning. I think those are all the questions. Obviously, from myself, a big thank you to everyone who's tuned in this week. And an even bigger thank you to yourself, Richard. Really appreciate having you through. I'll just give it one more second, but if we don't have any other questions, we can probably leave it there. But yeah, I found that session really good, so thank you. Got a lot of thanks in the chat.
Excellent. No, thank you for having me. That was great to run through Purview. I feel like I've been talking to Purview a lot in the last year and a half. So a lot of this I went through today is what I've been talking to for a while with my customers. So it's good just to bring out to the community that you have here. And look, you always feel free to reach out if you have any questions around Purview, and you can find me on LinkedIn on there as well.
Cool. Perfect. So for those of you who are still tuned in, we are looking at a February event as well. That will likely be on Python notebooks within Azure Sentinel, but we're just confirming the details of that. So until next time, everyone, have a lovely week, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.